2 of ITS Canada 2021 Winter Conference. This session is sponsored by Myovision. And now I am thrilled to introduce our VIP guest speaker, Yeatland, Yeats Wong. Hi, Yeats.
Hi, Rachel. How are you doing?
Really well, thank you. So happy to have you here. Now, listen, I understand you've been on the board of directors of ITS Canada for several years, and you've worked in municipal government, provincial government, and consulting. But tell me, what is your current role?
Right now, I'm with Transnomis Solutions, and I'm the Director of Smart Mobility Project Delivery over there.
Oh, very good. That's excellent. And now today you are giving us a Tide Talk. What is a Tide Talk?
So the Tide Talk it's a bit of a new thing for ITS Canada. It's a thought innovation engineering discussion. It's something that allows us to provide a little bit of change in our the way that we present things, and do a little bit of kind of sharing our experiences as opposed to our technical discussion.
Oh, fantastic. That sounds great. Well, I'm really looking forward to it. And for the viewers, please, I'd like to encourage you to ask any questions through the attendee portal chat. Now, take it away, Yeats.
So I've been a transportation engineer for over 20 years. My specialty is in advanced traffic management systems and applying new technology in ITS, Intelligent Transportation Systems. I wanted to tell you about an interesting example of an ITS project from my career, but I'm not going to focus on the technical solution itself, but rather on my approach to solving the problem, and also the key lessons I've learned to deploying a successful intelligent transportation system. Around 2010, I started a new position as the Advanced Traffic Management Systems Engineer for the City of Calgary. And my first project was actually an easy one. We already had the funding from Transport Canada, and we already had an approved proposal. So all I had to do was execute the approved plan. I looked over the plan, and I didn't like it. The project was to create a traveler information website that provided routing and trip planning for citizens, except that only a year earlier, Google had just released this little app for smartphones called Google Maps, and it was pretty good. I mean, it covered most of the functional intent of what we had planned for our own website, but there's no way that we were going to build something better than what was being built by Google, and we weren't going to get any decent bang for our buck. At the time we had applied for the funding, it might have made sense, but by the time we were ready to deploy, it just no longer made any sense. So I had a bit of a dilemma. Here I am, it's my first project in my new job, and the proposal and the funding has already been approved for that particular project, but here I am with my opinion that I don't think we should even build it. I also didn't want to go to my boss with a problem. I wanted to go to him with a solution. Now, around that same time, my colleagues at the city transportation data collection unit, they were experimenting with a new technology for collecting traffic data using Bluetooth signals, and they purchased those units from TPA North America. So I was speaking to TPA, and they told us about using this technology to estimate real-time travel time estimates. And that's when it clicked for me. You know, over on Deerfoot Trail on Highway 2, there were several large and expensive dynamic message signboards, but they were only displaying collision and weather information when there was an issue to report. But otherwise, they were actually blank 99% of the time. So I wanted to use these electronic signboards to display travel time information to the public. Now, there's plenty of obstacles. First, my city road department didn't have any experience with these devices, but our transportation planning department had experience in installing them and using them. But they only had 4 of those devices. Now, I had budget to buy more of them, but it was budgeted for the wrong project. And to top it off, the signs I wanted to use them on, they were not City of Calgary jurisdiction. They actually belonged to the province's ITS section. So coincidentally at this time, the province's transportation planning section, not the city's transportation planning section, they had actually rented a large number of these devices, and they had them for a month, but they only needed them for a week. So we decided to set up this, and it's very common in Canada, the ubiquitous pilot project. We wanted to use the pilot project to test out the concept, see how it works in a temporary deployment, and then see how the public reacts to it. So here's how I did this. First, I asked Alberta Transportation Planning Department to loan us their devices while they weren't using them, and they said sure, as long as we supply them with our collected data. Then I talked to our city's Transportation Planning Department to get them to help deploy and set up the devices. And they said sure, on the condition that we supply them with all the collected data. Then I talked to the Roads Department, Traffic Management Center, to get them to help run the software to transmit the necessary travel time data to the Alberta Transportation message signboards. They said, sure, well, as long as you get permission from Alberta Transportation. So then I went to talk to Alberta Transportation's ITS section to let me post travel time information to their signboards. And they agreed on the condition that it costs no time or money. Then I talked to TPA North America, and they agreed to help supply and tweak the travel time estimation software so that we could use it for our pilot project. So here we have 4 different departments, 2 different levels of government, and private industry, all collaborating on a single innovative technology project, but in a very short time frame because we had to go by the rental time that the Alberta Transportation Planning Department had these units out for. Now, for anyone who has ever worked in government, you would know that what I've just told you there is an absolute miracle. We've got 4 different departments, 2 levels of government, private industry collaborating together. So then I used the results of the pilot project. We did the pilot project and we got lessons learned from it. We used those lessons learned, wrote it up, and applied for a change to the federal funding to allow it to be applied to a permanent Bluetooth travel time display system. We also used the results of the pilot project to get support from upper level of city management and get support from the provincial government, and then also figure out all the technical glitches and the non-technical problems. And it worked. We got the funding approved, and we built Canada's first Bluetooth-based travel time display system on Calgary's Deerfoot Trail. Now, there are plenty of lessons learned along the way, but by doing that pilot project, we learned a huge amount. And so here's some of the surprises I had. Number 1, not everyone understood the usefulness of travel time information. They just hadn't seen it in Calgary. It's not really a purely practical piece of information. But if you know that there's an extensive delay ahead, sure, you can change your route, or maybe you can even use your hands-free device to let your client know you'll be late, or your mom, or whatever. From the feedback I got, though, just by having the information, right? Just knowing how long is it going to take me to get to work today. Having that on your daily commute as you're driving into work, it gives you that sense, that peace of mind. And that's not something that transportation engineers intuitively understand as much as they might understand signal timings and traffic volume data. The other big surprise to me, well, at least it was a surprise to me because I was kind of naive at the time. I did not realize how much concern there would be about privacy of information. We were able to address the privacy concerns in the final project because I knew about it from the pilot project. We implemented anonymization algorithms and automated data retention limits. We did a full privacy impact assessment before we deployed the permanent project. Again, because we had the lessons learned from the pilot project. Now, this was one of the first ITS projects that I had ever worked on, and I learned so many lessons from this project. It really set the tone for my entire engineering specialization in ITS. none of it would have been possible if it wasn't for having, a wonderful boss. I had support from upper management to completely change the project I was given. They listened to my opinion and they gave me a chance to prove myself. But on top of that, I also had this great network of colleagues in industry, across government, this huge network, and they helped me to make something wonderful happen. Often, when you're handed a project, you might forget to question whether or not the project should be even implemented the way it's been planned. Intelligent transportation technology systems and consumer demands, they change so quickly that you need to be questioning the fundamentals. To truly embrace innovation, you need to be flexible, and it's really incredible when you're working for an employer who's equally as flexible as you, and you've got partners willing to collaborate, and the federal program manager is able to understand that technology is constantly changing. Every partner in this project was able to think outside the box. Now, I want to pause there for a second. There's this phrase, we use it all the time, thinking outside the box. It's very applicable to my example project. I was handed this project in a box, and I looked through everything inside that box and decided, I wasn't comfortable. It's not that I wasn't comfortable with what was inside the box. I wasn't comfortable with the box itself. It was limiting what I could do for society. When we hear that phrase, thinking outside the box, some of you may know the origin of it. But just in case you don't, I'm going to tell you about the origin of the phrase, thinking outside the box. It's thought to have come from a classic 1970s, 1980s management consulting metaphor. It's about the 9 dots puzzle. It goes like this. The puzzle is, you're supposed to connect all 9 dots, but using only 4 straight lines, continuous lines, without lifting the pen from the paper. Now, most people can only do this in 5 lines. They can't do it in less than 5 lines. All right. So this is the typical answer over here. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If you wanted to do this in 4 lines, you have to think outside of the box. All right? Well, what's the box? The box is here, right over here. You've got this box. Here's how you go outside of it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I first saw this puzzle when I was a kid, around 10 years old, and it gave me a kind of this fascination towards innovative and nonlinear thinking. That's not the only solution, right? There's other solutions other than this one. I'm going to show you the solution I came up with at that time, using only 3 lines. It's not even the best solution out there, but I was really proud of coming up with this solution as a kid. Here we go. 3 lines. The point is, the box is what you need to think outside of. It's an imaginary box that your own mind created. There is no box. It's just 9 dots. Here, let me show you one more. This is another solution I came up with after I come up with this one. It's a solution with only one line. See, the rules only stipulated the 9 dots. They didn't talk about this box over here. It's the same way when I was handed my project. There wasn't actually a box around it. The rules that I had, they were imaginary. I'd assumed they were there. Everybody was more than willing to help me develop a project that went past the imaginary boundaries that I had created for myself. My boss, upper management, the federal government, there wasn't that box for them. So I just went around it. I managed to create something without regards to that imaginary box. So here are my key lessons learned in my 20 years career as a transportation engineer and as a specialist in intelligent transportation systems. First of all, be flexible. Technology is constantly changing. It's a changing landscape. So you have to be flexible and change with it. Number 2, don't create your own boundaries. Don't impose them on others. Particularly at the brainstorming and planning stages, you have to give space for yourself and others to develop new ideas. Number 3, innovation in technology is about collaboration and partnerships. It's about bringing together new technologies, new ideas, and new ways of doing things. Your colleagues and partners in government and in industry and at ITS Canada are the key to doing something absolutely wonderful.
Wow, Yeats, that was so great. Excellent. That was very fascinating. Thank you so much. Now, once again, I would like to encourage all the viewers to go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A section. So we do have some questions for you, Yeats. The first one says, has working remotely impacted the relationship with your manager or colleagues? And has this changed the flexibility that you talked about?
Definitely, there's been parts of working remotely that have improved and made things better in some ways and not so good in other ways. Definitely in terms of innovation, I find that it's much more difficult to work with colleagues. I need to be able to bounce ideas off of other people. I don't consider myself some brilliant brainiac that is going to sit in my basement by myself and come up with wonderful ideas. I think too linearly. So it's great to talk to other people, and the best time to talk with other people is around the water cooler rather than through chat channels and emails and that sort of thing. It lets you really bounce ideas off of each other, I find. So definitely in some ways, the pandemic and working from home has made innovation a little bit more stifled.
Yeah, interesting. I loved what you did when you demonstrated with those dots and how you were able to do that in 3 lines and then how you did it in 1. That was really great. I think that I maybe create boundaries on myself. So I really found that to be quite inspiring. So in talking about thinking outside the box, do you have any tips to help people think more creatively and innovatively?
So what I like to do for a kind of a brainstorming session or an innovation session, I like to, number one, say, hey, we're going to do a brainstorming session first. You set you basically say, I'm going to set some ground rules over here. Number one, we're doing a brainstorming session. There are no bad ideas at this point. So when you're talking, so rather than, because engineers have a problem with saying, okay, what if we use a thermal radar? Well, that's not going to work and you start shooting it down right away. And it's like, no shooting down ideas. Let's just let's just get all our ideas, good and bad, out on on paper over here, and that frees up the boundaries. It's the same way as with the the 9 dots. That's the first thing I realized was you have to just get past the idea of shooting down ideas, and instead you got to just go, hey, here's another idea. Here's another idea. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad.
Yeah, that's definitely good advice. Now, speaking of challenges, obviously you mentioned when you are thinking innovatively and outside the box, you are going to come up with these types of challenges. So, I guess what kind of advice? Like, I know that you say you persevere and you keep going. How does one do that when your boss or your peers are saying, "Here's why it can't be done"? What would you do?
Um, Definitely, there's a huge key of it is about communication. So starting off by going, okay, well, tell me what the challenges are, and I'll list them all down and say, okay, this is a challenge, here's another challenge, etc. So then we'll go through each of them and let people get comfortable with the ideas. Give them a little bit of time. And I think the other thing finally is the pilot project. It's always the best way to do things. In my career, that's what I found is you try it out first and then you address the challenges. But you try it out on a small scale for a small amount of money and you address the challenges afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. Great. We have another question from Rajiv. He says, awesome, Yeats. Great presentation. Now, doing things outside the box requires bold decisions and risk taking. So how did you convince your senior management to take those risks?
So I mean, you know, I make it sound like it's all bold and innovative, but really after the brainstorming session, it comes down to I bring in the technical team and we poke it to death. We go, okay, here's the problems, here's the risks, here's the challenges. The privacy impact assessment was, I mean, that took maybe 2 or 3 weeks of preparing this privacy impact assessment and talking to the different stakeholders and learning how to do all of this stuff. So really, after the creative brainstorming session, I take off my creative hat and put on my engineering hat, and I go, now we're going to go through this extremely systematically and address all the technical and non-technical challenges one at a time, come up with backup plans, and now we go to our standard engineering process.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. Here we have one. There is innovation in the private sector, like a Google or Netflix type of an enterprise. And then there's, of course, innovation in government, which has boundaries, right, to some extent. So can you comment on the difference between the public versus private sectors?
There's definitely, having worked in government, having worked in the private sector, there's definitely different boundaries. In government, I find that a lot of the boundaries tend to be focused more on, there's certain politically correct things over here that you can explore, that you can use public funds for, and definitely there is less boundaries if you think about it in that terms with private sector. But in government, you're able to affect more people with the changes that you're making. Your changes are far more wide reaching, and so there's kind of the good and bad for each. Definitely, it's been an experience working in both.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Now, you talked a little bit about the concerns for privacy impacts with the travel time and tracking technology. So what are your thoughts on that? And have they changed over time and with different projects?
I still take a lot of the lessons that I learned about privacy impact from way back in my first projects till today, and I still give it that same amount of thought. What are the implications of this, and can any of this data be abused? And if it can be abused, is there anything that I can do to mitigate that, and find a lot of the solutions that we're able to implement on the back end can actually protect privacy and bringing in that philosophy is wonderful. But I found in talking to people and as I'm talking to various stakeholders over the years, I found that people have become a lot more relaxed about it. And rather than myself becoming more relaxed, I go, well, that's great that society is more relaxed, but that doesn't mean that I have to take away the engineering controls in the back. I do want to still protect the public's data.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great to hear. Thank you. Now, what would your advice be to a young professional entering the world of ITS?
I think, my biggest piece of advice is, be open. I don't mean just be open to new ideas, be open to different career paths. 20 years ago, ITS engineering wasn't a career path. So, if you hyper focus on, oh, I want to be an ITS engineer now. Well, wait, there might be some brand new fields opening up already that could use your talents, and being open to all those different possibilities as opposed to just something that you've already seen and experienced. I think that'll open up career paths a lot for young professionals.
Definitely. Excellent advice. Thank you. I think that's it for our questions. Yeats, thank you so much for this fascinating presentation.
Great. Thank you so much,
Now,
Rachel.
thank you. Now, during the duration of this conference, please take time to visit the chat with our exhibitors and join the Exhibitors in the Spotlight presentation this afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern. And finally, if you're a social media user, post your conference insights or experiences as they happen using the conference hashtag ITSC 2021 on Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Bye.